Hello, welcome to Book Journey. Today, I'm going to interpret the book called Becoming the Narcissist's Nightmare: How to Devalue and Discard the Narcissist While Supplying Yourself. Its subtitle is Identifying and Countering Narcissistic Personality. When you hear the title of this book, you might immediately think of a buzzword in recent years, PUA. It refers to the emotional manipulation and psychological control of one party by another in a relationship through verbal belittlement, behavioral negation, and mental suppression. If PUA is a set of manipulative techniques that can be learned, then the narcissistic personality we are discussing today is a natural-born PUA expert. Narcissistic personality disorder, abbreviated as NPD, is what we are talking about. The common term narcissism is a prevalent personality trait that everyone has to some extent. However, the NPD we are discussing today is of a different severity level, and it has a strict set of diagnostic criteria. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, defines a narcissist as someone who, from early adulthood, consistently displays grandiosity, an excessive need for admiration, and a lack of empathy across a wide range of situations. The book lists the criteria for identifying a narcissist: first, exaggerating one's achievements and talents; second, indulging in fantasies of success, power, talent, and beauty; third, believing oneself to be special and unique, understood only by a select few; fourth, having an excessive need for admiration; fifth, feeling entitled; sixth, frequently experiencing jealousy or believing others are jealous of them; seventh, behaving in an arrogant and haughty manner; eighth, lacking empathy; and ninth, exploiting others in relationships. If an individual meets 5 or more of these criteria, they can be considered a narcissist. Since narcissists lack empathy and have exploitative relationships, they inevitably have victims around them. If you have ever been in an intimate relationship where you were constantly belittled and tormented, constantly doubting yourself, feeling increasingly worthless and insecure, then you may have been abused by a narcissist. Anyone, regardless of gender, background, education, or intelligence level, can become a victim of narcissistic abuse. Once trapped in the web of a narcissist, victims can easily become deeply entangled, developing a sense of worthlessness, anxiety, and even suicidal thoughts due to long-term manipulation and belittlement. Moreover, because society as a whole lacks awareness of narcissists and their manipulative tactics, victims are also prone to falling into a self-justification trap, facing public opinion attacks of victim blaming, and suffering double harm. It is crucial to learn to identify danger signals in relationships. The relationships we refer to are not limited to intimate ones. We may encounter narcissists in both family and workplace settings. They could be your parents, friends, teachers, colleagues, or leaders. Only by understanding what malignant narcissists are like and the covert means they use to manipulate others can we protect ourselves from abuse and harm. In this interpretation of the book, we will first discuss the characteristics of narcissistic personality disorder, the means by which they manipulate others, what causes their narcissism, and whether we should sympathize with malignant narcissists. Then we will explore why victims find it hard to break free and what kind of people are more likely to be targeted by narcissists. Finally, we will talk about how to sever toxic relationships and effectively cut off contact with narcissists. If we have to deal with some narcissists in our lives, how should we respond? Now, let's dive into the book. How do narcissists manipulate others? In interpersonal relationships, narcissists have a series of ways to manipulate others. The first method is the gaslighting that we are more familiar with. It is defined as an individual deceiving others to make them doubt their own thoughts, perceptions, or beliefs. Victims may wonder if they are going crazy and be labeled as crazy. The term gaslighting is inspired by a 1944 old movie Gaslight. In the film, the male protagonist deliberately dims the gas lights at home, making them flicker. When the female protagonist asks him about it, He says there is nothing wrong with the gaslights and that she is the one with the problem. Eventually, the female protagonist begins to believe that she really has a mental issue. Gaslighting is one of the common manipulative tactics used by narcissists. They will deny, downplay, rationalize, or distort their abusive behavior, making victims believe that the abuse does not exist and that they are the ones with the problem. The second method is to provoke jealousy. Narcissists will deliberately create triangular relationships to stir up their partner's jealousy. They will compare the victim's appearance, personality, and achievements with others, making the victim compete with their ex or other people, and instilling in the victim a sense of worthlessness. The purpose of doing this is to satisfy their own self-esteem, enjoy the jealousy and pain that the victim experiences, obtain narcissistic supply, and thereby control and suppress the other party. The third method is a combination of love bombing and deliberate belittlement. In the early stages of a relationship, narcissists will shower the victim with love bombing, flattering the other party, making promises for the future, and making the victim fall into a sweet bubble, feeling loved and having met a soulmate. Then the narcissist's attitude will suddenly make a 180-degree turn and start to belittle the victim. Narcissists will alternate between being warm and cold towards the victim, switching between sweetness and cruelty, forming an idealization-devaluation abuse cycle. Each time this cycle occurs, the victim's bottom line will be lowered a bit, and they will feel that love is so unpredictable and painful. The victim's sense of self-worth is constantly suppressed, and they will crave more affirmation and recognition from the narcissist, causing psychological and emotional trauma that may last a lifetime. When the victim questions the relationship, the narcissist will use the stonewalling method to leave the other party speechless. Stonewalling refers to the unwillingness to participate in any constructive dialogue, being perfunctory and procrastinating, and refusing to cooperate with the other party to solve the problem. Stonewalling is one of the most destructive communication methods and is very common in marital issues. Stonewalling is a form of emotional abuse that leaves the victim feeling insecure in the relationship, walking on eggshells, and even trying harder to please the narcissist. Next, the narcissist may disappear without a word or cheat and abandon the victim. However, abandonment is not necessarily the last step in the abuse cycle, because the narcissist may come back, which is called hoovering. This refers to the abuser, such a predator, sucking the victim back into the abuse cycle. Hoovering does not mean that the narcissist cannot let go of the relationship or that they have reformed. It is merely to reinforce the narcissist's sense of control and power. In their eyes, while they are pursuing a new source of supply, that is, looking for a new prey, they can also return to the old source of supply as needed. In intimate relationships, narcissists have other manifestations. For example, they are overly critical of their partners, using verbal violence to bully and belittle them, demeaning the victim's appearance, intelligence, career, achievements, and so on. This belittlement may be disguised as a joke or harsh but well-intended advice, but it will gradually instill a sense of worthlessness in you. Narcissists have a tendency to be abusive in physical or sexual aspects. They will control every aspect of the victim, constantly slandering and defaming the victim, and destroying the victim's relationships with friends and family, as well as their social support network. Through the above various means, it is very difficult for the victim to break free from the abuse cycle of the narcissist. To avoid being blamed for their own problems, narcissists may also bewitch the victim, projecting their own issues onto the victim, saying that the victim is jealous, possessive, clingy, and hypocritical, making the victim believe that they are asking for abuse. But in fact, it is not the victim who has these problems, but the narcissists themselves. A victim shared her personal experience in the book. This victim is a woman who fell in love with a narcissist. During her relationship with this narcissist, she often suffered from subtle and hidden belittlement. She said he would say things like, "You're a bit introverted, I'm bored, I need someone who can arouse my desire to conquer." When these evaluations are repeated over and over again, the person being evaluated will start to believe that they are true. When I protested that these evaluations were offensive to me, he would say that I was too sensitive. But then his attitude would make a 180-degree turn, telling me how much he loved me and how much he wanted to be with me. My self-confidence was on the verge of collapse. I also knew that he had a problem, but I was still affected. He made me feel both despised and needed. He would suddenly disappear and then come back to me. I really can't understand how a person can be so selfish and ruthless, playing with others without any guilt. Such an abuse cycle can easily shake one's values. Imagine that someone who once seemed to like you very much suddenly starts to belittle you and abandon you. This will definitely make you doubt yourself. The countless minor offenses, rejections, and abuses in this relationship will definitely leave a trauma. Just now, we talked about the series of manipulative methods adopted by narcissists. So you might wonder, if malignant narcissism is a personality disorder, then what causes narcissistic personality disorder? There are many theories about how NPD is formed, but there is still no definitive answer. For a long time, psychologists have believed that NPD may stem from trauma experienced in childhood, such as parental neglect, abuse, and denial. In order to protect themselves, they created a false self, thereby gaining a sense of imagined superiority and suppressing the part of themselves that could empathize with others in an extreme form of self-protection. However, studies have also shown that if parents spoil and indulge their children without limits, or instill too much sense of privilege in them, it may also lead to NPD. When a child is spoiled to a certain extent, they will develop a sense of privilege and disregard for the feelings of others. In addition, there is another situation where some parents treat their children as trophies or substitutes for their own lives. This essentially degrades the child's personality and objectifies them, so the child also learns to see others as objects to be dominated. In addition to these acquired reasons, narcissism also has a physiological genetic tendency. That is to say, if there is a narcissistic gene in the family, it will be passed down from generation to generation. In short, the causes of NPD are very complex, and there is no absolute conclusion. Since NPD is a personality disorder, some people may ask, are the PUA behaviors they exhibit towards others conscious? Should we sympathize with narcissists? As we mentioned at the beginning, narcissists lack empathy. In fact, the volume of gray matter in their brains related to emotional empathy is different from that of normal people. However, this does not mean that narcissists cannot control their behavior. Studies have shown that they still retain the ability of cognitive empathy, that is, they can distinguish what feelings others may have at present and the reasons why they have these feelings. They fully understand what they are doing and the impact of their actions. In his book The Wolf in Sheep's Clothing, Dr. Simon points out that narcissistic abuse is a deliberate plot. Sympathy and empathy will only allow the abuser to take advantage. Any reason, whether it is childhood trauma, NPD, or addiction, cannot be an excuse for inflicting emotional or physical abuse on others. The more we defend, rationalize, or find any other reason for any form of abuse, the more we push those truly deserving of sympathy, the victims, into the abyss of isolation and helplessness. The author says that she wrote this book to support the victims and let the sense of shame return to its rightful owner, that is, the people who hurt them. Some people who tend to blame the victims think that the victims are as problematic as the abusers, that they are ignorant and careless, and cannot cut off the relationship in time. They would say, "Why don't you just break up and leave? How could you end up being emotionally abused?" But the author points out that this kind of talk is armchair criticism and stems from their ignorance of narcissistic abuse. First of all, when the victim is with the abuser, they do not know that the other party is a narcissist because the abuser will disguise themselves with a false face. It is only when the victim has invested more and more emotionally and psychologically in the relationship and cannot extricate themselves that the abuser will reveal their true colors. Secondly, the abusive relationship really can change the brain structure and reshape the neural circuits, making the victim addicted to the narcissist, which makes it difficult for them to end the abusive relationship. There are very strong biochemical reasons for this. Victims need a lot of support, recognition, knowledge, and resources to recover from such trauma, and it is by no means as simple as breaking up and leaving. Next, let's talk in detail about the physiological mechanisms that make victims addicted to narcissists. Why is it always difficult for victims to break free? You may have such examples around you. It is obvious to everyone that one party in a relationship is being hurt by the other, yet the victim remains addicted to the abuser, as if they were on drugs, and they themselves may hardly understand this kind of infatuation. In fact, recovering from an abusive relationship is indeed somewhat similar to the process of quitting drug addiction, because the victim may have already established a biochemical connection with the abuser, which is also why cutting off contact is so difficult. In an abusive relationship, the narcissist will belittle the victim at one moment and then reward them with tenderness at another, making their attitude unpredictable and creating a kind of tension that pulls back and forth. This kind of tension does not exist in a secure relationship, and it is precisely this tension and drama that are more addictive. There is a concept called intermittent reinforcement, which means that compared to predictable rewards, sporadic rewards are more likely to make people addicted. Why is that? It has to do with our dopamine system. If the reward is unpredictable, the flow of dopamine will be smoother, so such abusive strategies like intermittent reinforcement are very effective on our dopamine system. Gamblers who can't stop in front of slot machines never know whether they will win or lose in the next round, and victims in abusive relationships are the same. They don't know whether they will face a tender reward or cold and ruthless treatment next. The emotional deprivation experienced during the belittlement phase makes the victim want to work harder to restore the relationship to a sweet phase and become more addicted to the rare warmth after the relationship is reconciled. As we all know, when we encounter obstacles in the pursuit of love, this experience of frustration will actually strengthen our pursuit of love. The trauma in an abusive relationship is the same. It will make us more addicted to the toxic partner, and the victim will also feel that the bond with the pathological partner is deeper and the connection is stronger. This actually somewhat confirms the old cliché, men are not bad, women do not love. When we see someone we love, our bodies release adrenaline, which makes our hearts beat faster and our palms sweat. In addition to love, fear also prompts people to secrete adrenaline. If we have experienced a period of high pressure and terror with our partner, we will become more attached and eager for them. This is a bit like the suspension bridge effect, which means that when a person experiences a tense and high-pressure situation, such as crossing a suspension bridge with a pounding heart, they will unconsciously mistake this tense and exciting emotion for the attractiveness of the person beside them. This is also why partners who have experienced a terrifying event together become more intimate, because fear has created a biochemical connection between them. The fluctuation between warmth and ruthlessness from a toxic partner can stimulate a surge in adrenaline, which may lead the victim to become an adrenaline junkie, addictively seeking the thrill of this adrenaline surge and becoming addicted to the fear, anxiety, and occasional ecstasy in the abusive cycle. Another biochemical substance, serotonin, is also exploited by narcissists. Serotonin is a hormone that regulates emotions. When we fall in love, the level of serotonin in our bodies decreases, and we become obsessively preoccupied with our partner, focusing all our attention on them. When the victim focuses all their attention on the narcissist, the impact of the latter's covert belittlement and emotional abuse is also infinitely magnified. Therefore, the victim's infatuation with the abuser is not only because of love, but also because of fear, anxiety, and rumination. Those who have not experienced emotional abuse think that victims can simply use reason and logic to extricate themselves from their current predicament, which is overly naive. First of all, trauma and abuse can cause substantial damage to the brain, potentially affecting areas such as the hippocampus responsible for memory, the amygdala that evokes emotions, the corpus callosum that communicates and integrates the two hemispheres of the brain, and the prefrontal cortex, the brain's planning and cognitive center. People who have suffered long-term abuse and trauma may experience difficulties in memory, emotional regulation, planning, and task execution. Secondly, when a person is in a traumatic environment, where they are constantly subjected to setbacks and frustrations, they may develop learned helplessness, completely giving up and succumbing to their situation. This is also why victims of psychological and emotional abuse seem completely unable to escape their predicament. They feel that they have no autonomy at all, and have no hope of successfully escaping. The connections that victims form with others in traumatic emotional experiences are called traumatic bonds, which can make people involuntarily seek support from abusers, and may even lead victims to develop Stockholm Syndrome. The master of psychological trauma therapy, Bessel van der Kolk, wrote in his book The Body Keeps the Score, "We now know that their behavior is not the result of moral deficiency, nor is it a lack of willpower or poor character, but rather caused by actual changes in the brain." In addition to the biochemical reasons we have mentioned above, there are also emotional and psychological reasons why victims cannot end the abusive relationship. One somewhat counterintuitive fact is that it is harder to break free from a long-term abusive relationship than to leave a positive relationship that is mutually nourishing and supportive. Why is that? First of all, in a healthy and positive relationship, you won't have too many concerns about breaking up. You know that the other party won't track or threaten you because you choose to leave, nor will they slander you in your common social circle. On the contrary, in a toxic relationship, breaking up may mean retaliation that follows. Secondly, in an abusive relationship, the victim's self-esteem will continue to decline. The narcissist's belittlement and physical violence towards the victim will make the victim feel self-doubt, and their self-esteem is on the verge of collapse. The narcissist will constantly compare them with others and their ex, so the victim will think, "Why am I not good enough? Is there something wrong with me?" Therefore, they think that if the relationship ends, it means he failed, because he ultimately failed to win the narcissist's love, and he does not want to fail. In addition, the victim may not be ready to leave yet. It may be that they are not mentally prepared, or there may be some external obstacles, such as economic dependence, having children with the abuser, or violent coercion, etc. The gossip from the outside world will also hinder their steps to leave, such as, "Why didn't you leave when he hurt you for the first time? Are you sure that is really abuse?" This kind of victim blaming will make them feel extremely isolated and helpless, and will also create a gap between them and their support network. They may prefer to stay in the abusive relationship, rather than risk being stigmatized, judged, and questioned by friends, family, and even the judicial system by telling the truth. Speaking of victim blaming, a common argument we often hear is, "Why did he target you? Do you have any problems yourself?" So let's talk about this next. What kind of people are more likely to be targeted by narcissists? There is a common saying that people are divided into groups, and the reason why victims are targeted is that they must have some similarities with narcissists in certain aspects, which attracted toxic people into their lives. But in fact, victims and narcissists are very different. Narcissists will not be with another narcissist, because being with another person who is emotionally incompetent or lacks empathy is no fun for them. Their target is those who have empathy and self-reflection. So as long as they have empathy, they may be targeted by narcissists, and those with high levels of empathy are more likely to become targets. Narcissists also prefer those who are excellent because what they want is to destroy the good qualities in another person. Studies have shown that the possibility of professional women suffering from partner abuse is twice that of non-professional women, and those women who fall into toxic relationships may be quite independent and positive people. We can also see that intelligent and successful public figures may also be victims of domestic violence. Our stereotype is that people with low self-esteem are more likely to become prey to narcissists, but in fact, a person who originally has high self-esteem and a sense of security can also be pulled down by narcissists. Secondly, people who have experienced trauma in the past are more likely to become prey to narcissists. If we were often neglected and did not receive enough love and recognition from a young age, we will gradually form a conditioned reflex and be more persistent than others in seeking recognition, and therefore more easily affected by the narcissists. Love bombing and more easily taken advantage of by the other party. After entering the belittling stage, the past traumatic memories are aroused, which will cause new emotional injuries. The real victims of emotional and psychological abuse are often the ones who constantly doubt and blame themselves. They will keep asking themselves, "Is it my problem? Is it my fault?" Many of them are even unwilling to tell their friends and relatives about their experiences because they are afraid of being regarded as crazy. The author said that he had coached some visitors with abusive experiences who were on the verge of mental breakdown, emotionally exhausted, and their self-esteem had suffered unprecedented damage, and their lives were almost destroyed. Emotional abuse, verbal abuse, and psychological abuse should never be and should not be regarded as part of the ups and downs in normal relationships. How to cut off toxic relationships. So, how can we cut off toxic relationships? First, you need to learn to identify the pathological and abusive narcissistic traits and behaviors. If a person has deliberately tortured you with the means we mentioned above and clearly lacks empathy, then the other party may have some narcissistic traits. But if the other party has empathy, but just rejects building close emotional relationships, then the other party may be somewhat emotionally incompetent. You can first observe the other party, grasp how many typical abnormal behaviors the other party has, identify whether the other party has completely met the diagnostic criteria for personality disorders, and then decide whether you want to cut off this relationship. The second step is to see through the distorted reality created by the narcissist through gaslighting and projection, and recognize your true situation. You need to see the narcissist as he really is, not as you idealize him, or the false mask he puts on himself. Facing the narcissist's accusations, gaslighting, and other means, you should tell yourself in your heart that his words are not true. The facts are not like this. You understand the real yourself, and only you can define yourself. The third step is to build a solid support network and gather people around you who can understand you and urge you to leave the narcissist. The fourth step is to cut off contact with the narcissist. Cutting off contact is not only not meeting or talking with the other party again, but also completely blocking and shielding the other party from the social media network and eliminating everything in the real and digital world that will make you think of the other party. This sounds easy, but breaking up with a toxic and pathological person is not that simple. You may encounter retaliation and slander from the other party, have to deal with your own biochemical withdrawal reactions, or return to the other party again and again. A considerable part of people cannot immediately and completely cut off contact with the abuser, or there are many twists and turns in the process of breaking up. The best way to break up with a narcissistic abuser is to cut off the relationship decisively, not to wait for the right time to break up, but to actively create the opportunity to break up. If the other party has left evidence of abuse on social media or WeChat, please keep these pieces of evidence and remind yourself not to compromise after implementing the cut-off contact. If possible, also cut off contact with the other party's friends, because the narcissist will slander you in front of them, and they may be used by the narcissist. The best way is to establish a personal network that has nothing to do with the narcissist, and belongs to yourself. After cutting off contact, it is to heal yourself and establish a personal life outside of the relationship. The author calls it the APP method. A is activities, participate in activities. P is people, make friends. The last P is purpose, find meaning. You can go to the gym more often to provide an alternative way for the adrenaline junkie in your body to get addicted to the abusive relationship to obtain adrenaline. Participate in social activities, make new friends, reshape your goals, hobbies, interests, passions, and life meaning, and take care of yourself from the body, emotions, and spirit to get your life back on track. The author suggests that you should first maintain 30 days of no contact, and then maintain no contact to the 90th day, which is the reference withdrawal time provided by the Detox Center for Addicts. The above are the methods provided by the author in the book to cut off toxic relationships. But in real life, sometimes we can't directly cut off the relationship with narcissists, such as narcissistic parents, narcissistic teachers, or narcissistic bosses. We may have to deal with some narcissists. So in this case, how should we protect our boundaries when facing unavoidable narcissists? The first method the author gives to deal with them is called the gray rock method, which means that the victim should treat the narcissist's manipulation like a stone, and not give any reaction to their provocations and offenses, or only give them a very plain and boring response, so that they will gradually feel bored. Knowing that they cannot get a reaction from you, they will no longer regard you as a source of supply. Second, disrupt the conversation. Narcissists like to repeat themselves, like to accuse and refute others. You don't have to spend time trying to understand what he is saying. You can directly disrupt their deliberately provocative conversation. For example, shift the topic to a harmless topic that narcissists are interested in. Ensure that this topic meets their need for attention and admiration, and will not hurt you, or make an excuse to interrupt the conversation and quickly end it. Third, affirm your own feelings and establish your own boundaries. List the absolute boundaries that narcissists must, such as do not call me after midnight, or do not speak to me in that tone. For example, when the other party speaks to you like that again, make an excuse to leave, or turn off your phone at night. Narcissists will try to break the boundaries, so you must ensure that your boundaries are absolutely not allowed to be violated. The fourth point, and the most important one, is to reconstruct your thinking. You need to know that narcissists are pitiful performers. They are like emotional leeches, needing the supply of others to survive. When you find yourself repeatedly pondering a criticism from a narcissist, it is better to stop, step back, and clarify whether this is really your deficiency, or a manipulative means of the other party, or a projection of the narcissist on you. Do not internalize the projection of the narcissist on you. Better control your emotional response, and you can deal with the narcissist more skillfully. Conclusion. Well, that's it. I have finished interpreting this book for you. The book we talked about today is called Becoming the Narcissist's Nightmare: How to Devalue and Discard the Narcissist While Supplying Yourself, which talks about how to identify and counteract narcissistic personality. We talked about the characteristics of narcissistic personality disorder, the means by which they manipulate others. We also talked about why victims always find it hard to break free. What are the physiological mechanisms for being addicted to narcissists? What kind of people are more likely to be targeted by narcissists? Why victim blaming is not acceptable, and how to cut off toxic relationships, how to deal with unavoidable narcissists. At the end of this book, the author mentioned several truths that he wanted to tell the victims of abuse. The first truth is that it is not your fault. Victim blaming is very common in society, including in the hearts of victims, but you need to know that it is not your fault. The abuser is the one who should be blamed. Second, your love cannot reform the abuser. The abuser's view of the world is distorted. Their interaction with people is fundamentally problematic. They think they are superior to others, have a strong sense of privilege, they exploit others to serve themselves, they lack empathy, and therefore can do things that harm others for their own benefit without any psychological burden. If you hope to change the abuser and give the other party more love, it will only fuel their arrogance. Third, you do not have to explain to anyone why you did not break up with the other party at the beginning. We have just explained that the traumatic bond that victims have with the abuser, the learned helplessness of the victims, cognitive dissonance, and the shame of their own abuse experience may all interfere with the victims, making them unable to let go of this relationship in time. Do not blame yourself for not being able to break free in time, nor doubt the authenticity of the fear, powerlessness, shame, and other emotions you have experienced because of other people's denial. Fourth, forgiving the abuser is an option, not an obligation. You have no obligation to forgive them, but you have the obligation to take good care of yourself. Fifth, in the abusive relationship, you may often doubt whether you are mentally abnormal because of the gaslighting of the other party, whether you are overreacting and overly sensitive. You need to know that the person who is really sick is not you. You can and deserve to have healthy interpersonal relationships.